This episode of Blood of My Blood is the one that finally flips everything upside down. The secrets, the lies, and the tension we've been building toward are no longer in the shadows, they're out in the open. Now, Julia's pregnancy, Simon's obsession with bloodlines, Henry's desperate search, and even Yocasta's heartbreak all collide in ways that leave you questioning every character's true motive. And just when you think you've figured it out, the writers pull you back into another layer of mystery. Episode 6 doesn't just continue the story, it changes the direction of everything we thought we knew. So let's start with Julia, because honestly, she's at the very center of all this chaos. We've been waiting for her pregnancy to reach the point of truth, and here it is. Her water breaks, but instead of comfort, instead of hope, there's nothing but fear. Simon suddenly demands that they get married before the child is born, which tells us everything about him. It was never about Julia, it was never about her safety, her happiness, or even the child itself. For Simon, this is about power, control, and the twisted idea that he's securing some prophecy that was never really about him in the first place, and that's what makes him so dangerous. Now, remember what the seer said in the last episode about 2 children Simon clung to? That as proof that his bloodline would give Scotland a king. But think about it, wasn't that prophecy vague on purpose? We already picked apart the fact that it might not be about Julia's baby at all, but about Jaime and Claire. If that's true, then Simon has been building his entire obsession on a lie. And that's why this episode feels so intense, because every choice he makes now is based on a complete misunderstanding. He thinks he's preserving history when in reality, he's rewriting his own downfall. But here's where it gets even darker. Julia, exhausted and terrified, is surrounded by people she can't fully trust. Mistress Porter, for one, continues to frustrate me. She's playing this strange game where she acts like she's loyal to Simon, but deep down, I think she's torn. Is it jealousy? Is it fear? Or is she trying to quietly plan her own survival in a house where no woman truly has control? I can't figure her out yet. In this episode, her refusal to help Julia again felt more like betrayal than protection. And every time she opens her mouth, I'm left wondering, whose side is she really on? Meanwhile, Henry is still on the outside, looking in, searching desperately for Julia. His determination is heartbreaking because you can feel his desperation tightening around him like a rope. He's been chasing whispers, chasing midwives, chasing rumors, and now he's about to hear something that could either break him or drive him even harder. When that midwife tells him the news isn't good, it changes everything. But here's the question, do we really trust that midwife? Because if she's tied to Archbug in any way, this could all be another layer of deception. Archbug knows how to manipulate, and I wouldn't put it past him to deliver bad news just to stop Henry in his tracks. But Henry doesn't strike me as the kind of man who gives up that easily. If anything, false news might only fuel his fire. And then there's Yocasta. Oh, Yocasta. If you weren't feeling for her before, this episode makes her pain unavoidable. Her jealousy, her bitterness toward Ellen, her longing for something she's never had, it's all crashing down here. And you can't help but wonder, is she going to make a choice that changes everything for Brian and Ellen? Because remember, Brian and Ellen are already walking a dangerous line. Their chemistry is undeniable, but their choices come with risks. They're already isolated after Murdoch's heartbreak, Julia's refusal, and Yocasta's mistrust. Now, with Malcolm Grant still lingering in the background, you start to wonder how much longer they can keep this up before the walls close in on them. What makes episode 6 so powerful is that every storyline feels like it's hitting the breaking point at the exact same time. Julia with the birth, Henry with the truth, or what he thinks is the truth, Yocasta with her heartache, Brian and Ellen with their forbidden love, and Simon with his obsession. All these threads are so tightly woven that the next move from any one of them could snap the whole thing apart. And that's why I think this episode is the most suspenseful one so far. Because it isn't about a battle on the outside, it's about battles happening inside every single character. Let's dive deeper into Henry's storyline, because this man's journey in episode 6 is honestly the most heartbreaking and confusing at the same time. He's been walking on nothing but faith, chasing every lead, hoping to find Julia before it's too late. And now, just when he's close, the midwife steps in with her so-called news. She says things that could break any man, the kind of words that aren't meant just to deliver truth, but to shatter hope. And that's what makes me suspicious. If Julia really died during childbirth, why do we see so many inconsistencies in what this midwife tells him? The timing, the details, even the way Archbug is conveniently there when this moment happens, it all feels staged. Think about it, Archbug has everything to gain by making Henry believe Julia is gone. If Henry stops searching, then Simon and his twisted control over Julia's life remain unchallenged. And that's exactly what Archbug might want. either out of loyalty to Simon or simply because he prefers to keep the chaos contained. But here's the thing Archibald doesn't strike me as completely loyal to anyone. He's clever, calculated, and always thinking of what benefits him most. So when he lets Henry hear this devastating truth, is he protecting Simon? Or is he setting up a bigger game that even Simon won't see coming? That's the kind of layered manipulation that makes this story so addictive. And then there's Julia herself, right in the middle of this storm. The tension during her labor is almost unbearable. You can feel the fear in every word, every glance, because this isn't just about bringing a child into the world, it's about survival. Simon hovering over her like some twisted king, demanding marriage vows while she's in pain, shows us exactly who he is. He doesn't want Julia as a wife. He wants her as a symbol, a trophy, proof that he controls the prophecy. Even though we know that prophecy was never really about him. And it's tragic, because Julia doesn't just fight for her baby, she's fighting to keep her own identity alive, in a world determined to erase it. But here's what stood out to me most, the prophecy's wording. Remember how the seer described the two children, one being a girl with blue eyes and dark, curly hair, whose time hadn't come yet. That clearly points to Claire still waiting in the future. And the boy destined to play his role when the nation is in peril, that has to be Jamie. So again, why is Simon convinced this prophecy belongs to him? I think the brilliance of this episode is how it shows us the danger of obsession. Simon believes what he wants to believe, twisting the prophecy to fit his desires. And that's what makes him so terrifying, not because he knows the truth, but because he believes in a lie so strongly that he's willing to destroy anyone who doesn't fit into it. Meanwhile, let's not forget Brian and Ellen. Their story might seem quieter compared to the chaos of Julia and Henry, but it's just as risky. In fact, I'd say their relationship is like a ticking bomb, silent for now, but guaranteed to explode. Their love is passionate, raw, and real. But the world around them isn't built to let it thrive. With Murdoch wounded emotionally, Yocasta consumed by jealousy, and Malcolm Grant still lingering like a shadow, Brian and Ellen are standing on dangerous ground. And in this episode, every stolen glance, every whispered promise feels heavier than before. Because now, it's not just about their feelings, it's about survival. How long can they keep this going before someone makes a move that tears them apart? And speaking of Yocasta, this is where her heartbreak reaches a whole new level. Watching her with Murdoch was painful, wasn't it? You could almost see her walls breaking down, allowing herself a moment of vulnerability only for him to speak Ellen's name. That single mistake shattered everything Yocasta had been holding onto, and now, in episode 6, her bitterness starts to harden into something more dangerous. You can feel her anger simmering, not just toward Ellen, but toward the entire situation. It makes you wonder, how far will Yocasta go to claim something for herself? Will she betray her own sister just to ease her pain? Or will she channel her heartbreak into something even darker? But here's the real kicker, everything is connected. Julia's desperate struggle to keep her child safe, Henry's devastating news, Brian and Ellen's forbidden romance, Yocasta's heartbreak, and Simon's obsession. They're not separate threads. They're a tangled web, pulling tighter with every scene. And episode 6 makes it clear that one wrong move from any character could destroy them all. It's not just about who wins or loses anymore, it's about who survives long enough to even have a choice. That's why this episode feels so heavy, so suspenseful. It's not just the events, it's the emotions. The way every character is standing at the edge of a cliff, unsure whether the next step will save them or end everything. And as viewers, we're left clinging to every detail, every look, every word, because we know the answers are hiding right there in front of us. Now, let's circle back to Simon, because his presence in episode 6 overshadows almost everything else. He isn't just a character anymore, he's a symbol of twisted ambition. The way he clings to the prophecy, forcing Julia into marriage, shows us how desperation can turn into madness. He doesn't care about Julia's pain, her fear, or even the reality of the child she's carrying. All he sees is the chance to attach himself to a destiny that was never his to begin with. And the scariest part, he truly believes it. That conviction is what makes him dangerous. Because when someone believes in their own lies, there's no reasoning with them. I couldn't help but notice how the midwife plays into this entire setup. If Simon is the hammer, the midwife feels like the chisel, quiet, subtle, but still shaping the outcome. In the trailer breakdown, we saw her talking to Henry, but here in the episode, she's equally present in Julia's suffering. That dual role makes me uneasy. Is she serving Simon? Is she being manipulated herself? Or is she another piece in Archibald's silent game? What makes me suspicious is that she gives just enough information to keep both sides in play. To Julia, she's a cold comfort. To Henry, she's a wall of bad news, and in both cases, her words change everything. Think about this. What if the midwife's truth to Henry that Julia, Or the baby didn't survive isn't truth at all, but a calculated distraction? If Simon wants Julia locked into his world and Henry gone for good, then what better way than feeding Henry a story so devastating that he finally walks away? But deep down, do we really believe Henry will give up that easily? I don't. If anything, bad news might push him even harder, and that's why I think episode 6 is setting up his next move. He may walk away for now, shattered and lost, but that burning determination hasn't gone out. It's just waiting for the right spark to bring him back into the fight. And speaking of sparks, let's not ignore Murdoch. His story is quieter here, but the pain he carries is loud. Watching Brian go after Ellen while knowing his own feelings were brushed aside is heartbreaking. You can feel the weight on his shoulders, like he's carrying betrayal and silence at the same time. Brian, for all his charm and bravery, didn't hesitate when it came to pursuing Ellen, even though he knew his cousin loved her. And honestly, that's why I'm conflicted about Brian. Yes, we root for him and Ellen because their chemistry is undeniable, but at what cost? Murdoch's pain is real, Yocasta's jealousy is real, and Brian seems blind to both. That blindness might come back to haunt him. Because if Yocasta decides to act on her anger, Brian and Ellen are the easiest targets. And we can't forget Malcolm Grant. Either he isn't just some throwaway arranged fiancé, his feelings for Ellen are genuine. He's patient, he's respectful, and in many ways, he's everything Brian isn't. That makes him dangerous not because he's cruel, but because he loves her in a way that might make him desperate. When she rejects him, imagine Malcolm feeling betrayed, turning against Brian not out of hatred but out of heartbreak. That's the kind of twist this show loves to play with, because it blurs the line between villain and victim. Now, back to Yocasta. Episode 6 digs deeper into her bitterness, and I honestly don't think it's just jealousy anymore. It feels like something deeper, something darker. For so long, Yocasta has lived in the shadow of Ellen, the smarter, prettier, more admired sister. And now, even the man she allowed herself to want murdered Ellen's name in the heat of the moment. That kind of wound doesn't heal, and when people carry wounds that deep, they either crumble or they lash out. Yocasta doesn't strike me as the type to crumble. If anything, I think her heartbreak is hardening into resolve. She might not be able to have what she wants, but she could destroy what others have, just to balance the scales. And that possibility makes her storyline one of the most dangerous ones going forward. But the heart of episode 6 is Julia's birth. It's the moment we've been waiting for. And it doesn't play out with joy, it plays out with dread. The atmosphere is suffocating because everyone around her has their own agenda. Simon sees her as a key to prophecy. Mistress Porter seems torn between jealousy and survival. The midwife feels like she's walking the line between truth and lies. And Julia herself is hanging on by sheer willpower. That's what makes this birth scene so haunting. It's not about welcoming life. It's about deciding whose power that life belongs to, and in a world like this, even a newborn isn't safe from politics and prophecy. Here's what I keep circling back to. The prophecy was never about Julia's baby. It was about Jaime and Claire, and if that's true, then this entire storyline is one long tragedy built on Simon's obsession with a false interpretation. So the real question becomes, what happens when Simon realizes he was wrong? Does he double down on his madness, or does his entire world collapse? Either way, the fallout is going to be massive. That's why episode 6 is so heavy. It's not just an episode, it's a turning point. Every character is reaching their breaking point, every secret is becoming too big to hide. And every choice carries a weight that can't be undone. Julia, Henry, Simon, Yocasta, Brian, Ellen. Even Murdoch, none of them can walk away unchanged. After this, and as viewers, we're left with nothing but questions. Who survives? Who betrays? And most of all, whose truth will shape the future? What really makes episode 6 so gripping is how it plays with deception. Nothing is what it seems. And the more you try to piece the story together, the more the puzzle twists itself into something new. Let's go back to Archbug, because honestly, I think he's one of the most underrated players in this entire game. On the surface, he looks like Simon's muscle, a loyal servant who does the dirty work without asking questions. But if you really pay attention, his moves suggest something else entirely. He doesn't act like a man blindly following orders, he acts like someone who sees the bigger picture and makes choices to benefit himself. Think about his role in Henry's storyline. If the midwife's bad news came from Archbug's arrangement, that means he's actively shaping Henry's perception of reality. That's not loyalty, that's control. He could be playing Simon, playing Henry, maybe even both at once. And if that's true, then Archbug is far more dangerous than we've given him credit for. He's not just following, he's steering, which raises the question, what does Archbug actually want? Power, security, or maybe just survival in a world where the weak get trampled? Whatever it is, episode 6 makes it clear he's pulling strings that others don't even realize are there. And this ties back to the seer's prophecy in such a chilling way. The prophecy was already vague, already open to interpretation. But with people like Simon twisting it and Archibald possibly manipulating the outcomes, it stops being about destiny and starts being about perception. Who controls the story controls the power, and right now, Simon believes he's the one in control, but what if Archibald is the one truly shaping how that story unfolds? Meanwhile, Julia's suffering continues, and every moment feels heavier. The birth scene isn't just physically painful, it's emotionally suffocating. You feel her isolation, trapped between Simon's delusion, Mistress Porter's confusing motives, and the midwife's questionable presence. And here's what struck me: Julia doesn't get to decide her own fate in this moment. Everything is being decided for her, whether she lives, whether her baby survives, whether she marries Simon. And that loss of agency makes her one of the most tragic figures in this entire series. But at the same time, it plants the seed for something bigger, because if Julia survives this ordeal, you know she's not coming out of it weak. She's coming out hardened, determined, maybe even vengeful. And that could completely change how the story plays out going forward. Then there's Brian and Ellen. I keep going back to them because their love story is beautiful, but it's also reckless. And episode 6 makes it clear they can't keep hiding forever. Every choice they make now has consequences that ripple out to everyone around them. Yocasta feels betrayed, Murdoch feels abandoned. Malcolm Grant, who might be the most tragic of them all, is left with nothing but his broken heart. And in a world where alliances mean survival, Brian and Ellen's defiance could end up costing more than just their happiness. It could cost lives. But what makes this part of the episode even more fascinating is how it contrasts with Simon and Julia. Simon and Julia's relationship is built on lies, force, and obsession. Brian and Ellen's relationship is built on passion, honesty, and choice. Two completely opposite dynamics, but both surrounded by danger. And that's the genius of the writing, showing us how love, in its purest or most corrupted form, can be the most dangerous weapon in this story. And let's not forget Yocasta. Her pain is becoming unbearable, and it's starting to twist her perspective on everything. I honestly think episode 6 shows us the beginning of her transformation. She's no longer just a jealous sister, she's a woman ready to act on her anger. And that's dangerous because Yocasta has intelligence, charm, and a subtle way of manipulating people when she wants to. If she decides to interfere with Brian and Ellen, or even Julia, the fallout could be massive. The saddest part, her actions wouldn't come from malice alone, they'd come from heartbreak. And that's what makes her unpredictable. People acting from anger are dangerous, but people acting from pain are unstoppable. Then there's the lingering shadow of the prophecy itself. We've talked about how it points to Claire and Jamie, not Julia's child, but what if there's another layer we're missing? What if the prophecy was never about individuals at all, but about the connections between them? A girl from another time, a boy who defends his nation, to lives intertwined to shape the future. If that's the case, then all of Simon's obsession, all of his scheming, all of his demands, none of it matters. Because destiny isn't something you can force, it's something that unfolds naturally, whether you fight it or not. And that realization could be the very thing that destroys him when the truth finally comes out. Episode 6 builds this tension beautifully. Every scene feels like a test of loyalty, of love, of truth. Who do you trust? Who do you betray? Who do you save? And the answers aren't clear. That's why this episode hits so hard. It doesn't just give us events. It forces us to question motives, and in a story like this, motives are everything. By the time the credits roll, you're left with a sense that the story has shifted. The world of Blood of My Blood is darker, heavier, and more dangerous than before. Julia's future is uncertain. Henry's hope is hanging by a thread. Brian and Ellen are running out of time. Yocasta is on the edge of something dangerous. And Simon is digging his own grave, one delusion at a time. By the time we reach the final stretch of episode 6, everything feels like it's dangling by a thread. The air is heavy. Every character is standing on the edge of a choice they can't take back, and you just know the next move will change everything. That's the brilliance of this episode. It doesn't rely on big battles or shocking deaths. It relies on tension, on the slow unraveling of secrets and the weight of emotions that can't stay hidden any longer. Let's start with Henry, because his arc in this episode is absolutely devastating. We see him confronted with the midwife's news, and for a moment, it looks like his entire world shatters. The idea that Julia could be gone breaks him in a way we haven't seen before. But here's the thing: Henry isn't the type to accept someone else's truth so easily. You can see it in his eyes, the doubt, the flicker of disbelief. It's almost like deep down he knows there's more to the story, that Julia's fate isn't sealed yet, and that's why I don't think this is the end of Henry's search. If anything, this crushing blow is just the setup for his return. stronger and more determined than before, but still, watching him stagger under the weight of that news hits hard. Because it reminds us just how much love and desperation can push someone to keep fighting even when all hope seems lost. Then there's Julia, trapped in the nightmare of Simon's obsession. Episode 6 finally forces her into the moment she's been dreading: childbirth. Under the shadow of a man who sees her as nothing more than a vessel for prophecy, Simon's demand to marry her before the child is born shows us everything we need to know about him. He isn't driven by love or even by family pride, he's driven by ego, by the delusion that he can control destiny with his bare hands. And it's tragic because in chasing that lie, he's destroying everything around him. Julia's pain is raw, real, and suffocating. And the fact that no one in that room is truly on her side makes it even worse. Mistress Porter's silence feels like betrayal, the midwife's presence feels like manipulation, and Simon's obsession feels like a prison. Julia's strength in this moment is the only thing keeping her from completely breaking. And that's why she's one of the most powerful characters in this story. And then we shift to Brian and Ellen, whose love story continues to be both beautiful and reckless. Every scene between them in this episode feels charged not just with passion but with danger. They're stealing moments in a world that's already decided their fate. And that tension makes their relationship feel like a ticking time bomb. What I found fascinating is how episode 6 contrasts them with Simon and Julia, where Simon and Julia are bound by force and obsession. Brian and Ellen are bound by choice and love. But the danger is the same: the world around them won't let either relationship exist peacefully. And that's what makes it heartbreaking, because while we know Brian and Ellen will end up together, the path to that ending is going to cost them dearly. And then there's Yocasta. Her storyline in this episode quietly simmers in the background, but it's one of the most important ones to pay attention to. She's past the point of jealousy now. This is about something deeper. Yocasta has been living in Ellen's shadow her entire life, and now even her chance at happiness with Mertnick has been stolen by the echo of Ellen's name. That kind of pain doesn't just fade, it transforms. You can feel Yocasta's heart hardening, shaping her into someone who might take drastic steps just to reclaim a sense of control. And that's what makes her dangerous, because unlike Simon, whose obsession is loud and obvious, Yocasta's pain is quiet, calculated, and fueled by years of resentment. If she decides to act, it won't be rash, it will be deliberate. And that could end up being far more destructive than Simon's madness. Archbug's shadow also looms larger than ever. He doesn't have as many direct moments in episode 6. But the ones he does have are telling. He moves like a man who knows more than he lets on. And every decision feels strategic. If he truly orchestrated the midwife's lie to Henry, then he's proven himself to be more than just a pawn. He's a player, shaping outcomes for reasons we don't fully understand yet. And that's terrifying, because a man like Archbug doesn't need power in the spotlight. He thrives in the shadows, where no one suspects how much influence he really has. And finally, let's talk about the prophecy one last time, because it's the thread connecting everything. We've said before that it points to Claire and Jamie, not Julia's child. But the brilliance of this episode is how it shows us the danger of interpretation. Simon believes it's his prophecy, Julia suffers because of it, Henry is misled by it, and even Archbug seems to twist it for his own use. The prophecy isn't just a prediction of the future, it's a weapon, and in the wrong hands, that weapon destroys lives. That's what makes episode 6 so powerful, because it reminds us that stories, once twisted, can become prisons, and Simon has built his entire prison on a lie. By the end of episode 6, the stage is set for chaos. Julia has endured the unthinkable. Henry has been misled but not broken. Brian and Ellen are running out of safe ground. Yocasta is ready to unleash her pain, and Simon's delusion has reached its peak. And through it all, the prophecy hangs like a shadow over every decision, every betrayal, every choice. The question now is simple: who will break first? Because once one thread snaps, the entire web comes crashing down. And that's why episode 6 is more than just another chapter, it's the turning point. From here on out, nothing will ever be the same.